Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneur Show. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. That's Bizzarro. For anyone who's out there, you can find us on Instagram at Justin the Food Entrepreneurs and at Justin Bizzarro, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, you name it. We're all on there. I just want to jump in and get recording. My time's a little tight today, but I want to make sure I get Peter's story in here. Continue Peter's journey, I should say, since I'm going to say it's a journey. The first question I have for you, Peter, is you're going from one concept, Spain wine bar, into like multiple concepts very quickly. Talk to me about how you're managing it. You're going to have different general managers, for lack of a better term. I don't know if that's what you're going to call them in each concept, but let's, for lack of a better term, call them that. How have you started to structure this and line it up in a way that's palatable, meaning that you don't choke on your food, and in a way that you can handle it, all the moving pieces, plus make sure Spain Wine Bar still has things get fixed. Like today we were talking about there's a plumbing issue. The existing business still has issues while you're still dealing with the issues of creating new ones.
Yes. Talk to you about it. First of all, I have no idea what I'm doing. So, we do have a plan, and there's a lot of things that come up. But Sand and Cedar Taverna, and the way I've kind of set up for the operation and the launch of Sand and Cedar is I basically have used in what I call, so Spain Wine Bar is our current restaurant that's been open, and so the culture, the mission statement, the quality of the food, obviously, the mixology program, the vibe, it's all going to be very similar, right? So the culture, mission, and the vibe doesn't really change. Sure, the music changes. We're not doing Spanish music. We'll have more of a Mediterranean house vibe, music being played. And then as far as the food, the menu will change. Now I've hired the management team for front of the house who've trained with Spain's team for a couple months now, so they can get pretty comfortable. And then basically we transition them over. Chef I hired a while ago. We've already done the test kitchen for the food, and yeah, we're moving through that.
Talk to me about that particular part. Let's just focus on Sand and Cedar right now to talk about this. How do you do a menu tasting? Who's involved in it? How do you determine what's a winner and what's a loser? Not that it's a bad dish, just it doesn't have the ability to make the menu.
So first of all, the core of the menu is to be Lebanese, Turkish, Greek, and Moroccan, right? The idea is to share the subtleties of the concept of the dishes and the similarities. So we've taken a lot of traditional dishes. We kind of created a menu where we're focusing on spreading, your meats and your seafoods and your vegetarian dishes and your vegan dishes, and going through different allergies, trying to balance out which stations in the kitchen are going to have what. So there's balance between your fry and your cooktop and your ovens and your cold stations, right? So there's balance there. Once we've kind of set up there, then we take those dishes and we start to have chef cook and prepare and try different, like for example, he's been working on a pita bread concept or a pita bread, recipe. So we give him books and he elevates, that situation. We just do tastings, right? So tastings, we all taste, food. We all know what great food tastes like and what it's supposed to taste like. And so we look at, when we're looking at dishes, we're not looking at plating just yet. We'll get to that. I'm looking just to make sure the basics are done correctly. So we're looking at like texture, flavor profile, the combination of the flavor. Is it too sweet? Is it too salty? Is it right on point? Does the dish taste perfect, but does it need some type of texture to it? So that way you can have the right crunch or whatever it is that we're working on. And then we give the chefs feedback, and they take it back. They take that feedback with them, and then they go ahead and continue working on those dishes until we hit a home run. Once we hit the home run, then we maintain that dish, and we literally check off that it's what we call menu ready. So then he has that recipe for that. Anything else, he may be working on a dish that may be like 80% there. So whatever feedback I've given him at that point, then he'll continue working on that dish and then bring it back, and we'll continue doing tastings until it becomes menu ready.
Talk to me about why wait for the plating till last. Just generally. I mean, I totally get it, but just for the audience, because I think a lot of people get mixed up in process and the proper way to plan a menu.
Yeah, so plating is critical, right? Plating is a very, very important part. It's the art the artistic side of this to create value, right? We want to make sure there's value. And a lot of times when we're doing tastings, right, and we don't know what we're doing, we want to make sure that we're good with the dishes first. Because what happens is you need to be able to buy the plates after you create the dish. So that's how I do it. I know some people may say, hey, we're just going to get these 7-inch round dishes. Fine. I don't really work that way. I'll create a dish that is something that's going to be part of our core item, and then we'll buy the plate accordingly to fit that particular dish to make sure that there's a value. The reason sometimes we also wait on it is because depending on what we're making, we're not really looking, we have an idea on cost. We have an idea on what meat's going to cost. We have an idea on what the sauces are going to cost. But when we're getting it, once we approve that first round and we say, hey, this is the menu worthy of the restaurant, right? Then we say, okay, now let's cost it. Let's plate it. Let's go ahead and create styles. Now, I will tell you, he's not throwing a mess on the plate when he first does the first round either. He is trying to plate it the way he thinks is best fit. But the portions may be way too large for what we're trying to do for the concept, because we are a mezza concept at Sand and Cedar, where he may be doing something bigger for tasting so other people can share. And then we play around with portioning, if that makes any sense. So we can actually get a menu price built.
Okay. Talk to me about the importance of the cultural transfer from Spain Wine Bar to Sand and Cedar, and why have them cross-trained for so long at Spain Wine Bar in the way that you're doing it. I think some people will be like, 2 months? How am I going to afford 2 months? That sounds crazy. Why?
Well, culture is critical. The mission statement is critical. This is not a place that is doing transactional experiences where, hey, how can I help you? And we're just serving food from like a cafeteria. Like, this is a restaurant where we are gauging, certain accolades. We're trying to set ourselves up for a James Beard Award. We're trying to set ourselves up for, potential in Michelin star. Now, I'm not saying that's the goal. It's not. But if we get it, that's great. But the goal is to really create a fantastic environment. My culture, my mission statement that we talked about in our previous, cast was really focusing on how we're serving others. When I get a new person, it sometimes takes the transitional time for that person to really understand who we are. We're very unorthodox. We're very different. We don't treat, certain restaurants may have maybe 60% of, the process of what we do. But because we are so different, I want to make sure I have the best hires who can represent who we are. That is the most important thing to me. And that 2-month investment, it usually takes about 2 months. We have about a 6-week training program for our managers. And then once the 6 weeks are done, then you want to see how they are performing, and typically there's a 90-day review or trial. We don't. So, but I've hired them about 2 months for these concepts because we're trying to kind of tighten it up. But that's me being tight in 2 months.
Yeah, I love it. Talk to me about planning ambiance, if I want to say it the proper way, in the restaurants. Like, you're expanding now beyond one concept. How did you create it in Spain Wine Bar, and how are you taking what you've learned from that and then transitioning it into the new concept?
So I'm sorry, just to kind of repeat the question, how am I taking what I've learned in Spain?
Yeah, the ambiance, the how you lay it out, the sort of what the experience is for the guests beyond the food. What are they walking into? What's the feeling that they get? How do you go about that? The design work, the designing of the inside.
A great question. And I'll have to send you this amazing, I have an about page for Sand and Cedar, but I want people to be transformed into, like, when they're in the space, I want them to feel like they're in the actual environment. So for example, when you look at Sand and Cedar Taverna, I have over 40 old world arches that look like they've been there for thousands of years. They're broken. The bricks are all kind of funny looking. They look very odd. They look like they've been around for a very long time. And we created that kind of concept and spent the money for it because we want people to feel, not only do we want you to feel that you're in the environment, we want you to understand the people that were there. So when you look at some of these old world arches, they look like they were torn down. I told kind of funny, I told my bricklayer, I'm like, I want this place, even though they're brand new, to look like it's been around for 1,000 years. And I want it to look like somebody tried to knock them down. And so I was driving him crazy. But the funny thing is, it looks exactly like that. So to understand, like Sand and Cedar Taverna. I just want to step back before I tell you why I did it this way. Lebanon is known as Cedarland. This is a Lebanese-centric restaurant. The reason they called it Cedarland is not because they have a ton of cedars, in which they do. The reason it's called Cedarland is because it represents the people. If you know anything about cedar trees, the roots are very, very tough. They're very strong. They're very strong. They can deal with like severe weather and be fine, right? Because of how strong the roots are. And so when you talk about the people, the people are very tough. They've been through a lot over the years. They've been through battle. They've been through, different wars. There's a lot of like strength in the people and what they're about. So in the architecture, you get to kind of live that as like, oh my God, this is what we're eating around. We're eating around this old world place that's been through so much, but there's also a lot of beauty in it too, right? There's so much beauty. And the fact that they can maintain the warmth of their hospitality and the culture and the concepts of the food, even though they've been like through all these things over the years, is what we're trying to recreate. The same way at Spain, you see kind of an old world vibe, but it's a very different approach because it has more of a Spanish culture to it. So I think the architecture is the big piece for me. And then the vibe will depend, we're all about music and art, by the way. So we integrate both of those very seriously into all our properties. So for example, with Sand and Cedar Art, there's beautiful art that's been created just for this restaurant. As a matter of fact, the artist who's Goldie Miami, her artwork for Sand and Cedar is going to be on display at the Art League of Ocean City, Maryland for the month of February. She's been the featured artist, by the way. And that's the first time she's been asked to do it. And she's actually using Sand and Cedar's series to be on display. So for the first month, all the artwork that's supposed to be at the restaurant is going to be at the art museum, right, in the art gallery. And so we're going to tie in on an event on February 7th and display some of our foods, the way people are going to be dressed and how we're going to serve the food. You got to give them, and then they're going to see the artwork. And the artwork display is basically, it features women in the middle of the desert. They have a nice glowing, like a shawl, but it's very light and very kind of fun looking. And they're just either running or walking into the desert. And it shows a sign of like freedom and going into the future and kind of going on to their journey, the next journey in life and their next, where they're going to, because, in our journey, we don't necessarily know where we're going. We may have an idea, but we still have to be able, we can't tell the future. We can't see the future, right? So the same thing that happened back overseas when they were dealing with all these things and going into the future and transitioning over into all the different years that happened, that's the same thing that this art kind of depicts with these women. And I'll share some of these pictures with you as well too. But, so it's music, which is going to be Mediterranean house music, right? A lot of the flutes and the different types of guitars, where we call them oud in Arabic, and the tablas, which are like their Middle Eastern drums, right? So we're going to have those types of music, but it's going to be minimal sound. You may have a couple, vocal pieces that may be foreign to people. Maybe like it's going to be in Arabic. It could even be in English, but it's going to be very kind of old world with the Mediterranean house beats. And then we'll have the old arches, of course. And then we'll have the servers who are going to be dressed in like a Mediterranean, well, we call it a galabeya. A galabeya is the long dress that you see a lot of the Middle Eastern people wear back home because that's what they do. But instead of having it go all the way to their ankles, they're actually cut off in the middle and they're going to be like shirts. So we're integrating like the dress code, the vibe, the architecture, the food, the whole shebang into this concept.
I think we talked a little bit about falafel ending up on that menu before.
You already know.
Yeah.
You already know.
But let's talk about the other menu items. Let's talk about sort of how you've built the menu, what the categories of the menu are and why, and the tribute you're trying to pay to where and why.
Understood. Great question. So if I was to lay out my menu as an outline, the first part will be our spreads, right? There's spreads from all four regions. We're going to have like hummus, that's going to be Lebanese. We'll have baba ganoush, which is Lebanese. Lebna, which is Lebanese. Actually, the Lebna we're going to do the Turkish style. And then there's something called jijik, which is the Turkish version of tzatziki, right? So it's very subtle. It's very different, but it's very similar, but it's delicious. So we're going to have the Turkish tzatziki on there. We'll have the Greek taramusalata, which is a fish roe, which is incredible with olive oil, amazing spread. We'll have something called hitipiti, ETPT is Greek. It's creamy feta with roasted red peppers and garlic, kind of spread creamy throughout that. Very, very delicious. And then we're going to have this eggplant dish that's Moroccan. It's a spread that we're also going to be creating. So we have the variation of cultures in that particular category. The next categories, well, I'll kind of go through them. We have the cold mezzas, which are the cold small plates, the hot mezzas, and then we'll have the large experiences, and then the desserts. That's going to be kind of the layout of the menu. The cold mezza or cold apps, mezza means small plate, by the way, in Arabic, is going to be like we're going to do Greek grape leaves, right? They're going to be vegetarian, rice-filled grape leaves with minced tomatoes, some garlic and parsley. So we'll have those for service. We'll have, God, I'm trying to think here. My mind is frozen. I know there's a couple other dishes off of memory. I'm having a blank. I'm going to jump into hot mezza and I'll kind of share with you. I'll go backwards. The hot mezza will have a lot of dishes there. I mean, we have something called borek, which is like it's phyllo dough. It's like it looks like a finger or like a cigar, and it's phyllo dough wrapped with like a nice cheese, a melted cheese. We'll actually have one with the ground beef, almost like a bolognese style, very similar to that. So we'll have those two options with some side flavors. That's going to be from the Turkish region. We'll have a misa'a, which is going to be the Moroccan version of a sauteed eggplant dish. That's amazing with pine nuts. Very, very delicious. Caramelized tomatoes. We'll have kibbe, fried kibbe. Fried kibbe is Lebanese. We're going to do it so ground beef with pine nuts and bulgur wheat on the outside, served with like a nice yogurt, sauce on the side. So we'll have something very similar to that. And I'm sure there's a couple other dishes as well too. But again, we've been working on the menu, so I can't remember everything we've approved. But yeah, there's a lot more than that. Then we'll have our large experiences, for example, which will have like a short rib on eggplant puree. That's going to have like a Greek style to it. Our shrimp saganaki will be, small shrimps with olives, capers, again, like roasted cherry tomatoes, kind of in a small dish. It's so tasty, so good. That'll be done Greek style. The halibut and the branzino will be done Greek style. We'll have like a lemon potato, which is done Greek. We'll have a Lebanese soup it's a crushed yellow lentil soup. It's amazing. It's actually vegan. And we'll also exchange that with avgolemino, which is it's a chicken lemon rice, basically soup, which is incredible, but it's called avgolemino, right? So we'll interchange that depending on the seasons. And we also have a harissa soup that's Moroccan that'll also be kind of exchanged depending on where we are, what time of the year we are. And of course, we'll create further specials as we grow, but those are kind of be my starting, my starting three. Salads, we're doing a nice spread of salads. We're going to have obviously our Greek salad. We'll have a tabbouleh salad, which is going to be, we're doing the Turkish version of that. We're going to have the fattoush, which is a Lebanese salad with the toasted pitas. And I know there's another one. There's a village salad also that we're doing that's going to play off of a Moroccan salad as well too. So those are the three. We may not have all three or all four there. So we may exchange, and we may actually have new creations as well too. We are looking at doing tabbouleh with, traditionally tabbouleh is a heavy parsley dish with bulgur wheat and minced tomatoes and onions and all these little vegetables. What we're considering is instead of bulgur wheat, using quinoa, right? So quinoa can create the same type of texture and the same concept, but you have a super food that's in there with the protein and something kind of unique and different. So we are looking at creating that as well. Of course, we're going to have the kebabs. We're going to have shawarma. We're doing the Lebanese shawarma. We're going to have the chicken and lamb. So this goes on a vertical spit. We butcher everything in house. We layer it in layers. We have our fat injected in between, so you have it nice and juicy. And this is a slow roast that we cook. Anytime somebody orders it, we cut it fresh off the vertical spit. So we're excited about that. We'll have the kofta, which is going to be the Lebanese version. We have the Adana kebab, which is the Turkish version. We're going to have the Moroccan tagines, right? We're going to have a fish tagine, a lamb tagine, and a seafood tagine, all going to be Moroccan inspired and actually being done in actual tagines that we bought from Morocco. So super excited about that. And then tapping into desserts, we are looking at Great spread. We're making our own traditional baklava. So they all do it differently, right? The Greeks typically will do walnuts. They're usually bigger baklava pieces, and then they're drizzled with honey. Whereas like the Middle Eastern, like Turkish and Lebanese, they're very similar. We use simple syrup and we use pistachios, right? So we're going to be doing it the Lebanese and Turkish ways, and then we're going to have something called galaktoburuko and bugatsa. Those are Greek. Something called lometal adi. Lometal adi is or lokomadis is it's like a donut. It's kind of like a munchkin at Dunkin' Donuts, that size.
I
And
love
they're served hot,
munchkins.
and they're amazing. They're amazing, and it's crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside. And it was actually my father's favorite because we have the same version, the Middle Eastern version, but we're doing the Greek version there. And then, of course, halva, which is Turkish. So we're going to have a variety of desserts, and those. Once we get our starting menu off, we've already created some of the backups to these items, and then we'll continue to create more dishes and have fun and grow. But I want to hit what we call the home run hitters, where all the dishes that we're putting on here are like some favorites in the culture. They're like some of the big dishes that we want to perform and execute. And then we'll start to get, for example, chicken liver is a very big part of Lebanese culture. It's actually one of my favorites. It's with sauteed onions and it's very lemony. But you know what? I'm probably not going to launch with chicken liver. I'm probably going to wait, because some people will love it. Some people may say, "What the hell are you thinking?"
I've grown to love chicken liver. I mean, I didn't love it before, but over the last few years, I really liked it. And even beef liver, I've eaten a lot more of just out of it tastes good and it does well on a frying pan and with a lemon and onions and like I do like a Mediterranean style. I do think that what you're doing is there's so much room for it. It's such untapped food areas, particularly Turkish food, Lebanese, Moroccan food. It's all very delicious. Spending time enjoying those foods and I spent a lot of time with a lot of Moroccans during the 2018 World Cup because we somehow ended up moving around Russia with Moroccans and seeing 2 Morocco games.
Oh, it's funny.
And so the food, the inspiration, the spices, I think, I'm going to touch on something. We often, particularly like Turkey, because of trade embargoes, don't even get to enjoy those areas of the world truly as much because we don't bring in all the delicious spices that they have there for various odd reasons, piracy, trade embargoes, disagreements over whatever. And so one of the things I like about it is it's so because of these ideas and they're less traveled to by Americans, we don't get to experience it or don't get the exposure. And this is a way of doing it that I think works well, particularly through food as the vehicle by which gives them the education on it to go expose themselves to those parts of the world on a greater level, hopefully, maybe.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll see. There's going to be a lot of changes there.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
Talk to me about inventory, ordering, setting up the menu. I think a lot of people open restaurants, a lot of entrepreneurs, they open it. And then one of the things they're like, they never know how to weigh out inventory or how to deal with it or order what ingredients. How do you manage that at the beginning? You've learned from Spain Wine Bar and your previous experience, but sort of how do you handle it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is the first time you get some feelers out, when we first came to, open up Spain, we kind of went smaller on our inventory, saying, okay, hey, we want to hit, it's all about covers and about how many we want to hit, with covers and understanding what impact it was and how many seats we have in the restaurant. So we get deliveries 6 days a week. The only day we don't get deliveries is Sunday, right? They don't even deliver on Sunday. So we order fast and furious. We go small because we try to minimize waste. And, if we're saying, hey, today we're going to order, we want 100, but we also need to prep, right? So we also kind of gauge like, hey, what's the expectations of this launch? And then we order according to projections, right? Like projections dictate labor. Projections dictate food costs, beverage costs, everything, right? So they basically, the nice thing is when you get projections, you say, look, my food costs for you, my friend chef, is 24%. So we're and I know that my split. So say we were projecting, just to make numbers easy, $100,000 a week. So $100,000 a week is what we're projecting to do for the week. So then what we do is we take a 24% cost off that 100,000, and that's what chef gets. He gets allocated. He gets that $24,000 of allocation for the week to spend money, and he takes that 24,000 and he uses it for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He buys it. This is the week ahead now, making sure that he's ordering enough so that way we can start prep and get ready. And so the bar is the same thing. We look at a 16% cost, right? So we look at 100,000 revenue. We figure out what 16% cost is, right? And then that's the money that he gets allocated. It's the same thing with labor. So with labor, we're looking at 15% on the hourlies. So that's a daily, right? 15% daily. So now we know we're going to hit and miss. So for every $1,000 we project for revenue, that to me is one server, right? And then depending on if it's north of 5,000, okay, now we're interjecting food runners, so many food runners, so many bussers, depending on how many managers I have on staff, hostesses, of course, and all that stuff. So it's always based on projections, and we keep our numbers pretty tight. And then once we get that first weekend, then we kind of have a book of business to kind of go after and make those adjustments. And, I'll be honest with you, Chef does an amazing job. We never go through waste, if anything. He's done a really nice job of not, because I don't like 86ing anything either, but he does a really nice job of keeping it pretty solid, with our numbers. And he takes the initiative and we work it together to make sure those numbers are accurate.
The budget for the chef, does that change with you? Are you guys staying with seasonality, staying with all of that as well? Or do you dictate the change that way he stays inside of it, so it's a very easy way for the chef to sort of have guidance in his menus or his service?
Absolutely. Look, at the end of the day,
and he obviously knows the numbers, I would assume, what the sales are and what plates.
Exactly. He knows the numbers. Like, of course the budget changes because we're not looking at a flat number of what he can spend. We're looking at percentages. And based on history and based on successful restaurants, we know that the value, like, look, I know we can have a food cost between 28% and be fine, or even 30%, even 32%, depending on the concept, and be fine, right? I know that. But I challenge them because we are a small plate restaurant. And when we want to talk about plating, now's the time to bring that up because plating is a big deal. So we look at costs. Like, so when I look at a menu, right, when I look at a whole entire menu, if I added everything, then I would expect to see a 24% cost at the end of the day, which is a very, very tight, by the way. I know you're probably thinking like, P, you're kind of aggressive, right? I know that. And the reality is,
you're talking to the guy who's in the hospital food business. Right. Where every portion had to be exact, or else, because we were dealing with pennies, we were just dealing with millions upon millions of pennies. But it just, pennies came in the form of millions upon millions of meals in our case. But I understand what you're saying. Portion control is a big deal to plating.
Portion's a big deal. Yeah, we I mean, like you said, you talk about bagging. That's actually not funny. We actually do that. Certain dishes, and we say, hey, we commit, if we're going to do this dish, this is a 4 ounce, 3 ounce or 3.5 ounce, whatever it is we agree on seafood for a mezza style, then that better be weighed out. You know what I mean? And so that's the plan, is to make sure we have consistency there. So that's very important. So for example, I gave you the example of the 100,000, right? But the reality is, when he gets bonus, because these guys all get bonused, managers, chefs, everybody. And they have a range that they need to live within in order to maximize 100% bonus. So in this case, let's talk about food costs, as we're talking about food. Anything between 24 to 25% on their bonus structure would basically give them 100% on their bonus. I'm good with that range. Between 25 to 26, now you're talking about an 80% bonus on what's allocated for that particular, food cost, right? And then from the 26 to 27, I gave them a 60%, and after that, there's nothing. So 27, you go beyond that, you're in trouble. But at the end of the day, almost at 28, then you're in trouble. So what's happening is, he'll say, okay, our projections for this week is 250,000. Well, guess what? your budget just went up by 150,000. It's 150,000 more in sales. So now if you take that same 24% to that $250,000 sale, you know what your budget is. So it's very mathematical. It all works. And, look, there may be times where we have an event, we do an offsite event where he needs to buy, and his weekly purchase may be a lot higher, but he'll balance it out with the following week. At the end of the day, we look at these things day to day, week to week. We have meetings about it. We talk about it. And look, the creativity's there. We are using top quality foods. We're not using cheap food, right? So we're spending money on organic eggs. We're spending money on Wagyu. We're spending money on Freebird Farms, which is, chickens that are, antibiotic free, hormone free, kind of like that organic, so we're spending quality dollars, and it's just about plating, how we can present it, create value in that dish, price it accordingly, and make our money. And that's really what it comes down to. And then they do a really good job with that.
Love it. I
think I'm giving you too much information, by the way.
No. What we're doing, we're setting it up, and I'm trying to paint a picture, and we're sort of talking about it, and it's important because you have a lot going on. Personally, I think we talked about this maybe in the first episode a little bit, but the regiment, like, how do you stay disciplined, focused, balanced amongst all the responsibilities and stress right now? Where is it lying?
Well, there's a lot going on. There's 4 projects happening at the same time. Plus, I'm trying to build, get Spain built. Honestly, this is where God comes in. We talk about, sharing God's grace and loving others. I have a lot of faith. I pray on everything. I ask God to let His will be done. And then I'm literally here in the hotel. Like, I'm here every day, making sure the contractors are here. I have a great relationship with them. They would do anything for me because I take care of them. On times like this, they all stepped up and they're all doing their thing. They're even going to work over the weekend to make sure this thing gets done for me. So honestly, I'm steady and easy. Like, I have a plan, an overall plan. We have all these concepts coming up. We have Sand and Cedar trying to come up. It's been delayed, and in the beginning, I got to tell you, Justin, I pay rent's not going away, right? We pay rent every single month where, we pay for our bills. I mean, that doesn't go away just because you're not open. The long story short of it is, like, just have, faith. I don't get tense anymore about delays, kind of leave everything in God's hands. And, I just say, if it's supposed to be delayed, it's supposed to be delayed for a reason. And a lot of my mentality came from, what happened in New York, when I was upset about the closing, and to come find out a couple months later, the building collapsed and we were supposed to be in there. So these are, I don't get frustrated anymore. I just go with the flow, but we push, right? I work hard. I push. I get my team on track. But, construction, if everyone's done construction, even in your own home, you get delays and things happen and you just have to deal with them.
It still blows my mind. The whole, like, we were literally, that negotiation went on for like 12 hours. It was the longest negotiation that got nowhere ever. And then we couldn't line up the financing, and then my shoulder, and then the building and all of that. There was a lot of things that just, I don't know, the humbling, hold the button, it's not time yet, and we've reconnected, and I think there's greater good that's going to come out of this also, sort of going our own ways. You had to go your own path. I've had to go my own path, for sure.
For sure.
And I think that there's more there, particularly in, I'm going to just anchor it, but I think there's a lot here as you get these businesses open, a lot in what I've already got from the audience from the first episode. We haven't released the second episode. We're recording the third. I've already asked Peter to do 3 more in the future. I'm going to give him some time to breathe a little bit before I do that, because he's got 3 other concepts that he's working on. And so, but we're going to talk about it. You'll see the next one we're going to talk about will be the title of this one, just because I want to keep the titles fresh for him and the concepts that he's working on. But you'll see it in the notes also. This will be my last question, Peter, really quickly. Ocean
Sure.
Pines is a little bit different than being where you are in the hotels. It's a little bit of a sub neighborhood of Ocean City. That's where you want to spend a lot of time there. growing up, a lot of friends, parents had condos or apartments or whatever, and then you'd go up to the beach. Do you feel that being distant from the downtown-ish area is a hindrance? Because you've obviously went in full force. Just out of curiosity, just because I know the area.
Well, it's funny you brought that to my attention. I've had a lot of certain people say, "What are you doing?" It's 15 minutes away. There's older people who live there. They're not going to appreciate this. They look at the design. When you see the design, it's kind of outrageous. It's so amazing, and they're like, "I can't believe you spent this money in Ocean Pines." So I will tell you, when this project came to me a couple of years ago, I said no because of my circumstances. I was busy with Spain and I was focused and I didn't know what Ocean Pines was and I had pulled away. I had organically got myself involved to help the person who had this property, just helping them out with menu, helping them out with finding some good chefs and interviewing for them, just helping them out. I had no involvement. And as I was getting more interjected and I saw the space, I kind of just sat in prayer and I said, God, give me kind of, what do I do? Is something I jump into, something I don't jump into. I had this really overwhelming, calming, and it was a great deal. Plus I also had a very overwhelming, calming kind of to this property, and when I went all in, I know it's going to be different. And I've been to amazing restaurants in the middle of nowhere and will probably go back because it's an experience. And so what I'm building is probably the most beautiful restaurant, I think, even in this area. I'd even push to say probably I'd put it up anywhere. I put it up in New York, Chicago, DC. I don't care. I think it's one of the most unique and beautiful places. It'll have an identity. When you take a picture, regardless of where you take a picture, you're going to know where you are. I have an amazing chef who trained with Daniel Boulud, who's launching this concept, who's also worked with Jose Andres, and who's had a crazy experience, who's launching this project for me. And I have a great management team ready to take it on, and every single one seems excited. I'll be honest with you, Justin, I am running this hard because I feel like because of the success we've had at Spain, I think it's all going to trickle down, and people are anxious and all waiting to come and have dinner there. They're very, very anxious. And I think once you create amazing experiences and they're genuine, they're warm, they're hospitable, the food is amazing, the cocktails are sitting right, the music is there. It's a 15-minute drive from Spain, the parking lot here at Spain, to that parking lot there. I honestly think it's going to be a huge success. I think
it is closer to Salisbury, right, as well?
Yeah,
those type of towns.
It's in that direction. But it's literally from the bridge. The bridge is like, I don't know, 9 minutes, from the bridge when you're crossing here. By the time you go around Spain, it's like a couple extra minutes, but it's not far at all. It's not far from the casino, actually. But that's the thing, is being outrageous, being a pioneer. People told me that Spain would fail, that I was too soon to the game to create a concept that didn't have anything to do with beachy food. The name was different, the food was different. It was on top of a rooftop, which no one's ever had built a rooftop before. I know that most of the people who were in Ocean City came and looked at the space and none of them wanted it. They were all nervous about how are people going to park? How are people they're going to go into the elevator in the hotel to go upstairs, and who's going to walk by it? Nobody's going to walk by it. There was a lot of issues here. And, here we are, running an amazing concept, very successful restaurant, and it's all because of God's grace. And I feel that God's brought me here to do this work. It's his platform, so he can decide to do whatever he wants to do. I'm just going to be his servant. I'm going to build. I'm going to continue doing everything in his name and let everything go from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. Where can they find you online? And where can they find your restaurants?
The restaurants are going to be in Ocean City, Maryland. The Spain Wine Bar is a rooftop on top of the Cambria Hotel by the 50 Bridge. We're on the 8th floor. And Sand and Cedar will be in Ocean Pines. I can send you the address, but the address is, it's by the casino. It's 11070 Cathedral Road. If you have social media, Spain Wine Bar does have a website. We have an Instagram and we have a Facebook. Sand and Cedar Taverna does have an Instagram, so you can follow us there now, as we'll be posting, family and friends and openings for the restaurant, so you can see all the information there.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter, for joining us again today.
Thank you, Justin.
I appreciate it. Everyone should go back and listen to part 1, by the way, and that story of the collapse. That whole thing is just, I still can't. It's still, every once in a while, like, I'll think about it. It'll bring tears to my eyes, but it's the shivers that I think, the goosebumps that are more so. But anyway, I think that part 2 will be out also by the time this one comes out. That's one is really worth going to listen to. We talk about merging Christian values into your businesses effectively on a deeper level. It's something we're going to get into more with Peter later on as his life sort of, like I said, continues to grow. We'll get him back on the show for a couple more shows to dive deeper into his concepts, the ideas behind them, as well as sort of instilling values into those businesses and allowing God to be glorified through them. So thanks again, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers and bye. And everyone, thank you for listening in. We're out.